Stay Kind, your weekly show about kindness and all different topics from all over the world. And we're back with Stay Kind, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a fantastic show lined up, and I have a couple of co-hosts that I will bring on board right now. First and foremost, none other than Nurul Fathiyah. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. A very good evening to everybody.
Nice to see you again, Nurul. How
Yep.
have you been?
Good. Been good. I went back to my mom's place, so lepaskan rindu. So all good.
Yes, it has been a while since us Malaysians have been able to cross borders. So,
Yes.
Alhamdulillah that you managed to do that. And we do have our good friend Michael Teoh.
Hi, Azib. Hello, Nurul. Great to be back here with all of you. I have been on a hiatus for a while, but always a pleasure to be joining friends and hopefully to inspire and impact more lives here over on LinkedIn and across all the social media platforms, wherever you guys are tuning in. Thanks for having me, Azib.
Wonderful. I'm glad to have you and Nurul as well, and especially our guest for tonight, Dr. Finn, all the way from the south of France. Let's bring him on board right now. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Dr. Finn. He said I did not have to pronounce his last name. He gave me a bit of a reprieve there. How are you,
Yeah,
sir?
I'm very good, and thank you very much for the invitation to join your show.
Wonderful to have you. And please let our audience know where you are actually based right now.
I am in the southern France, right north of Nice on the Mediterranean Sea, up in the high mountains, surrounded by a lot of wild animals. Where we do a lot of leadership training up here as well, and as you know, I've been to Borneo a lot in the past, and we have done some training in the Borneo rainforest. But for most people, it's more accessible going up here in the high mountains and get outside their comfort zone, because we have learned over the years that when you want to develop leaders, you want to develop people, you need to take them outside your comfort zone, because that's the only way that we are open to new impressions.
Wow. Michael is a trainer himself, so I'm sure he's very familiar with that. But before we get into business, so to say, perhaps you'd also like to introduce a little bit about yourself personally and about your journey and how you arrived where you are right now.
Well, we have 2 weeks, right? No, I think that I think when you're young, you have a lot of plans. You have a lot of plans for what you do, how you're going to do it, what your success criteria are. And when you grow up and you become older, and you get your setbacks, and you get your experiences in life, you learn that you really can't plan a lot of things. You just need to act in the world that's around you, and I think that's what pretty much has happened to me over the years. So you develop generic competences, and you work with it. You meet people all over the world, and they inspire you. And I always seen my life as you're a little piece of dust that is flying around in the room, and you are pushed by one or the other, and you end up somewhere where you didn't expect to end up. And what I have learned personally, and what I like personally, is that you should not try to fight it. You should not try to stick to the original plan, because you are influenced by other people, other events, for a reason. And particularly one book has made a big difference in my life, and that's the book Celestine's Prophecy by James Redfield, which is pretty much about that everything happens to you for a reason. And I think that's very important. And I teach a lot of students around the world, business school students and university students and executive programs, and especially young people today. They seem very competitive and very, very determined on where they want to go. And I'm trying to make them relax a bit and enjoy the life, and just trying to. I want to have this particular job before I'm 30. I want to make so much money before I'm 40 or things like that. But I just learned for myself that it's really not what life is about.
Wonderful message. Before I pass on to my co-host, I'd like to call out to our audience. Typically, our audience comes from all over the world, and we have fantastic participative members of the audience. So we have a couple of people already saying hi in the chat. Fatin Nur Ain. We also have brother Hasnain from KL. So if you're tuning in right now, please let me know where you're from and where you're tuning in from, and that will help us have a handle on who's watching us right now. So I'd like to pass the floor to Nurul if she has any questions. Go ahead, Nurul.
Yes, so I look at your LinkedIn profile and you talk a lot about winning corporate culture and things like that. And Azif himself is leading a corporate culture before, and I myself have also been involved in helping organization build a performance culture. I don't know if this is too early to ask this question, but I'm just interested to know, right? I've been in many organizations where the retention is really high, which mean a lot of people stay in that organization for years and years and years, which mean when they are in that organization, they sort of feel comfortable with what's going on around them. Now, here's a question for you. How do people know, or how do I know that I am actually in a bad culture?
That's a very good question because it's like when you're putting a frog into cold water and you warm up the water slowly, the frog will die and boil to death. So when you are joining a company, you're joining a company with a lot of expectations, and when things are getting bad slowly over time, you might not experience it before it's too late. And I guess you have seen a lot of people as well that are in companies with bad cultures that you can see that they are not feeling well, but they can't feel it themselves. That's why I think it's important that no matter what job you have and no matter what position you have, I think it's very important to have networks outside your company. At least many of the hundreds of clients that we have worked with over the years, it's very often so, especially middle managers and top executives, they don't have a lot of people outside their company that they see professionally. They have family and friends, but they don't get so much inspiration from other people from outside who can tell them about a different world, a different corporate culture. But one of the signs that I think that you could use to measure whether you are in a good or bad culture is whether you feel like it's that you have to push yourself to go to work every day. And one question you can ask yourself, I know it's a blunt question, but you can ask yourself that question: if I didn't get any money for it, or only very little money, would I still be doing that job that I'm doing today? And if the answer is no, then it's about time that you think about what else you can do.
That is a very interesting question to ponder upon. Thank you so much, Dr. Finn. So I'll pass it to Michael.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nurul and Azib. Thank you for having me. Dr. Finn, it's a pleasure. I've had the opportunity to
It's all
visit
mine.
the beautiful country of France. I was in Lyon before. Haven't had the chance to travel to Nice yet, but hopefully one day. Hopefully one day. Yeah. And Dr. Finn, thank you. I heard earlier that you have visited our beautiful country of Malaysia before, and I'm glad you enjoyed it here. There's so much
A
we can
lot.
do here when it comes to exposing leaders to uncomfortable situations, especially when you were in Borneo. There's a lot of beautiful landscapes there, beautiful culture, beautiful perspectives to uncover. Dr. Finn, in the work that I do, running my company, Thriving Talents, we develop culture by providing team building, team engagements, by creating scenarios and situations for leaders to mingle and to cooperate with their teams. We have run that passionately since 2012, spreading our wings to 41 countries and working with some of the Fortune 500s. Having said that, though, Dr. Finn, here goes my question to provide you context. Malaysia, we have just lifted our lockdown. So economic activities are returning back to normal. But a lot of our clients are still pondering the question, can we really go back to normal? So a lot of them are still thinking about needing to manage a hybrid team or a remote team. So my question to you is, Dr. Finn, as I've also researched about you, you are the who's who in terms of building leadership culture. My question for you is, what practical step-by-step advice would you give a manager wanting to build a high performance remote team? What would your advice be?
That's a very good question, and actually, the question came up long before the COVID-19 that companies were seeking to outsource and having remote team and reduce travel costs and all these things that we all know about. I think what's important, and my own company, we are 10 people plus a lot of freelancers all over the world, and we are entirely remotely connected and have been that since 2001, actually. We always been a global disconnected organization. So learning from our own organization, I think it's very important to have a person that is a kind of connecting point. That we have one person in our organization who is almost her only task is to connect with people and talk non-work related, but just to see how everything is going and what we can do to connect people if they need anything, or we can and spread rumors and tell stories and connecting people, because it just works so much better when it is a person doing it than when you are posting things on an intranet or social media. Having that personal contact with people, either whether it's with or without video, it's really important to keep that personal connection as personal as you can when you are remote. Another success criteria we have found is that it's important to meet once in a while. That we meet twice a year, all of us, for a week, where we do training. We invite people from outside to teach us things. We do a lot of social activities. We travel together, and we're trying to keep things together as much as we can, despite that we are working all over the world. And especially when you're a consulting firm, even if you were at the same office, you would probably be at your client's location most of the time anyway. So it really doesn't make any sense having an office place where people are not anyway, because if they're in the office, they're not making money.
That's right.
So they should be with the clients anyway. And I've built a lot of consulting organizations for IBM and Computer Sciences Corporation and Arthur Andersen Business Consulting in the past. And some of them have been very good at nurturing that culture of actually being able to stay together. Some have not. So we are trying to take these learnings into our own company and also how we are advising companies today. And going back to your question about will we go back to the old good old days as it was before? I don't think so, but I think we have become more conscious about what it actually means being together with other people, that we do not take it for granted. It is like that with many values, in fact, that we don't realize the value of anything before it's taken away from us. So that many of us, almost everybody across the globe, have felt that we couldn't just go to visit friends and families, and we couldn't just meet up with colleagues. We couldn't do things as we did before. So on one hand, I think we're going to learn new things, new ways of working together. But I also think we really appreciate being together with other people is very important for us as human beings.
That's right. That's right. Dr. Finn, I'll just have one follow-up question before I pass the ball back to Azib right here. And my follow-up question would be, you mentioned about your wealth of experience working with the likes of IBM, learning from people like Andersen Business Consulting, which is, of course, now Accenture as we know it. My question is really practical. Managing remote teams, what are some rituals that you would advise a manager to establish so that he or she could start building the foundations towards starting the path of building a high performance remote team? Is there any particular ritual that you saw being done by these managers from your experience, Dr. Finn?
Rituals.
Yeah, like a weekly ritual or something that they do. Like I like
Well,
your
I have,
example. Yeah.
well, I have to say, I was not presented with the questions before, so I need a little
No
time
problem. This is natural. This is
think
raw
and
and
because
natural.
it is really, really good questions. But when we've been working with cultures and also working with cultural change in organization, what we see is the biggest obstacle to change is fear.
Right.
And we human beings, we are motivated by fear more than anything else. We think we're motivated by positive motivation, aspirations and dreams and things like that. But most of our actions is actually based on a fear that we have. For instance, when I teach my students around the world, especially the younger ones who are studying MBA or something like that, and I ask them, how many of you would be here if you had all the money you wanted in the world and everything? And none of them would be there. They're all going to that education because of fear. They have fear of not making it. They have fear of not meeting their own expectations or the society's expectations or their family's expectations. So fear is pretty much driving most of our actions as human beings. It's not always explicit to us. We are not always conscious about it, but behind the scenes, it's always fear that is driving it. And when it comes to remote teams, I think it's very important to be conscious about what are people afraid of when they are working in a remote team, because they will never tell their manager their fears directly. And I guess you, Michael, you know that very well as well, that sometimes, often actually, people tell you things as a consultant that they would never tell their bosses because they're afraid of what might happen if they show sign of weakness or sign of doubt or sign of fear or something like that. So that's a great thing about being consultant, that you get all the truth and what people are really feeling. Don't you agree, Michael?
Excellent. Hey,
So
I
yeah.
agree.
So the ritual should be to always focus on trying, as a leader of a remote team or any team, trying to put yourself in the shoes of the people who are working for you, because they usually have a lot of other fears that you have. Try to understand what kind of fears the people you're working with, what kind of fears do they have, and try
It's
to hedge
about
these fears.
empathy. Yes, Dr. Finn, I love that. I think you sum it up so nicely. It's about empathy. Leaders having more empathy for their teams, especially when they working remotely, instead of leaders having some negative perception that, are my team members slacking? Are they sleeping on the job? But to really have that trust and that confidence and to build that culture. Thank
Yeah,
you, Dr.
and
Finn.
also as a leader, you have to acknowledge that the team members, they will very rarely tell you what they're really feeling.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Dr. Finn. Thank you for answering that question. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Great questions. And I think we all need to realize what Dr. Finn just mentioned, that we just have to accept that when we ask our team questions, they're not going to give us everything. They have fears and they hold back. Fatin has a very wonderful comment. She says, now, yes, students are easily influenced by what they see as success, but it's true, we need to enjoy our life in every moment to the fullest. I really loved your comment early on, Doc, about, trying to explain to young people that you can't really plan this out. I mean, now I'm in my 50s. I totally understand where you're coming from. But as young people, they really think that you can plan this out. But I think rolling with the punches, being agile, is probably a skill that young people need to build. What do you think?
I totally agree with you, and I think it's so sad that young people, that they are so focused and determined on reaching specific goals, and it's not even their goals. and that's why many of them end up getting seriously depressed, because when they reach their goals, when they earn that amount of money, when they get that job that they dreamt of, and they find out that they are still not happy. Um, that's why it's a big problem. I just read an article the other day that the suicide rate among the PhD students in the UK is tremendously high, because the external pressure is so big, and we see it in a lot of other countries as well, that the suicide rate among young people who are striving for a career or finishing an education, it's very, very high, and it's so sad. It's the young people who should have the dreams. It's the young people who should have the freedom to have the dreams and try out wild things. And it should not be people my age or your age. It should be the young ones.
Exactly. So, but in your business and in your writings, you talk a lot about the winning culture. So, where does that come from? How did you land on describing culture as a winning culture?
Oh, that's a long process actually, and winning is not necessarily associated with making a lot of money, or making an organization profitable. In our terms, the way that we use the word winning when we are talking to our clients and I'm talking to my students is that it's all about creating a culture where everybody feels at home. And the way we do that, and if you look at the cross-cultural research over the past 45, 50 years since it started with Geert Hofstede, who put people in boxes based on nationality, which I think is a stupid idea actually, because everyone in the country is not alike, especially not today. So when you put people in boxes and stereotyping on them based on their nationality, you're actually just creating more conflicts. So we have developed a different framework based on the research from Trompenas and Charles Hampton Turner, where they started to look at dilemmas, what happens between cultural groups. Instead of putting people in boxes, we are looking at the synergies and the potential conflicts there are between cultural groups. So we have developed his ideas even further into a framework where we teach people to start by looking at similarities instead of looking at differences. Because when you meet a new person or a new group of people for the first time, you actually have a choice. But most often our brain is looking for how is that person, or how are these people, how are they different from me? So you make a long list in your head about how he or she or they are different from yourself. And when you have made that list, it's very difficult and complicated to find out what do we actually have in common. But when we teach people cultural intelligence, we also teach them to move that switch in the brain in the other position. So you start by looking at what do I have in common with he or she or they. And then you make a long list of, oh, despite that we look different or speak a different language or work in different fields, we have all these things in common. And when you feel comfortable about that, okay, I have 95% in common with that other person or that other group, then it's so easy to overcome the differences afterwards. So it's just a mental change that help us creating these winning cultures, because we teach people to focus on the similarities instead of the differences as a starting point. We are not neglecting the differences, but it's all about the starting point.
Wonderful. That's a great lesson. So we'll go around again to Nurul Fathiyah.
It's interesting when we live in a world where we appreciate diversity, but at the end of the day, we can only achieve and enjoy diversity when we recognize our similarities, right? So that is the message that I'm listening from what you just described earlier. Very, very interesting. Okay. Dr. Finn, I love to hear stories. So you've worked with a lot of organizations, and help a lot of organizations shift from the culture that they're having to becoming a winning culture in their own definition. So would you be able to share maybe one interesting story from the work that you have done, about this shift, how from whatever culture they have and move towards winning culture. Interesting story. I mean, you don't have to mention the client's name, just in general, and also why that is such an interesting project.
Well, we've been working with other companies, of course, but I think that one of the most profound examples of creating winning cultures are when we are working with post-merger integrations, when two companies are merging. Because usually when two companies are merging, yesterday they were competitors and they were telling very bad stories about each other. And suddenly when they're merging, they have to merge into one culture, and the enemies yesterday are suddenly the friends and best families today. So we have had some interesting examples there. We were working with a company not so long ago where two engineering companies that we helped doing the post-merger integration process. And they were coming from two different parts of the world. And they are working with a very specific technology and creating products within that technology. But the engineers in these two companies, they are different as night and days. So, and the engineers in one company, they are dressed up very formally in suits and shirts and ties every day, whereas the engineers in the other company, they are very informally dressed up. And on hot summer days, you could see them in t-shirt and shorts and sandals. And can you imagine what happened the first time we brought these two groups of people together? There were 400 engineers in total. So we brought a selection of them together for the first time. And we interviewed them about what do you think about your new colleagues? And when we talked to the engineers who are very formally dressed up and asked them, what do you think about your new colleagues? And they could see their colleagues from the other company dressed up very, very, very casual. And they said, we cannot work together with these hippies. They are not real engineers. And when we asked the other guys who are very casually dressed up, here are your new colleagues, what do you think about them? First impression, they're not engineers, they're salespeople. So we and that was a very good example that we judge the book by the cover, that we instantly put people in boxes based on what we see. And all the engineers, they have gone to the same universities, studied exactly the same thing, working with the same set of technologies. But despite that, they had prejudices against each other from the beginning. Of course, we videotaped everything so we could show it to them later. And then we started the process of actually helping them move the switch in the brain from looking at the differences into looking at the similarities. And it ended up to become a very, very successful merger because they had different strengths and weaknesses, because the way that they're dressed up is not only a way that they're dressed up, it's also a reflection on the values that they have, the underlying values that they have. And when you can connect different value systems successfully, which we managed to do in this case, then you get a much wider, more exclusive, much more innovative culture that you would ever have had if they were on their own.
All right, thank you, Dr. Finn. Just a follow-up question, right? So in that case, right, when merger happens, usually the stronger culture will eat the other one? So in this case, do you work towards finding a new values, or do you take a mix of take the best of the world and put it together? How does that work in this particular story?
In this particular case, the companies were almost the same size. So it was not like, for instance, we have worked with a lot of pharmaceutical companies who have bought up early stage pharmaceutical companies in order to feed into their chain of products. And that's another case in that situation. But in this particular case, the companies were almost the same size. So when whenever we help companies create values, we always look at the strategy. Why did they do the merger? And they did the merger because they wanted economies of scale. They want to boost innovation because there were competition from Chinese and American producers as well. So they wanted to become more innovative, and they want to have economies of scale. So they both wanted to increase quality, and they wanted to reduce price. That was the reason behind the merger. So when we were looking at the two cultures, and we were doing a cultural due diligence and define the cultural DNA of the two organizations, we were looking at each of them strengths and weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses that the company with the formally dressed up engineers were that they were very resistant to change, that they wanted to keep things as they were, even where the perception were like, we have been successful with this technology for so many years, why should we change that? Whereas the other company, they had less fear, they had a lot less fear. They were trying out a lot of things, and they failed with a lot of things. So they could learn from each other. So we were looking at how can we actually create a culture where you can try out new things, but also learn from experience, so you don't commit the same mistakes over and over again. So gradually we created a value system in the new company where they managed to become more innovative, but the quality also increased. So they could learn from each other, because when we talked to the informally dressed engineers, they knew when we talked to them and we talked together that they were very innovative, came up with new ideas, but they also knew that they made a lot of mistakes. They realized that themselves. So we asked them, would it be nice if you could still be as innovative, but you didn't end up doing the same mistakes over and over again, that you could get someone on board who could actually help you improve quality and do some planning and do some research and be a little less wild guys than you are, who could actually make you succeed more. And they agreed to that. And when we talked to the other guys, the formally dressed engineers from the other company, we asked them, we know you're very good at what you're doing, but would it be great if you could create new things and take risk once in a while and improve what you're doing and perhaps create new things? Yeah, but it's risky and we don't want to fail. But these guys over here, your new colleagues, they know all about failing, and they're still here. So we actually loosened up on both sides and created that value system in the company where they were willing to take fears, and they also realized that they were not punished when they made mistakes.
Wow, sounds like a marriage counselor trying to to get the best of this, but super.
It is actually, you're not the first one who are making that comparison. that when we are bringing together companies, and we do a lot of crisis management as well, of course.
Right.
But when we are bringing together companies and trying to create that 2 + 2 is more than 4, it is a kind of counseling, and that process of learning and seeing things from other people's perspective and not only your own perspective, you can use that everywhere.
Interesting.
Right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Finch. I'm really pumped up right now, because this is really a nice story, and yeah, awesome. Don't have any more comment. Maybe I just pass it over to Michael.
Thank you so much, Nurul, for passing the baton to me. Dr. Finn, I also enjoyed the story a lot. You would have noticed a trend right here, Dr. Finn. My sister over there, Nurul, she'll be asking you about culture, about company. I think being a millennial myself, I'm always looking into what type of culture or the company that I would love to be part of. And since I'm building my own company, is building my own culture. Hence, I'll be focusing a lot on the future. Remote working, hybrid working. I just have a question for you, Dr. Finn. So this is in the context of remote working again. What are some of the mistakes that you would advise managers to start noticing or start avoiding especially when they want to build a new culture now of managing their teams remotely? What are some of the mistakes or the blind spots that you would advise them to take notice, especially before they even happen? Any thoughts, Dr. Finn?
Mhm. Well, I think that many of the managers and companies today who are having these remote teams, I think they sometimes forget that they need to invest more in maintaining a relationship and maintaining the mental and social connection
Nice.
with people, instead of just focusing on meeting the targets in the spreadsheet. Because I think a lot of people forget, not intentionally, but don't think about that people who are working remotely sometimes feel very, very alone, especially people who are not having a family, who are not having a spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or children or whatever. Many of these people who are singles, and the majority of the people in the world today are singles, and usually single, well-educated single people, they dedicate a lot of time to their work, so that they have their entire social life at their workplace. And suddenly, when they are sent home, working from home, not only do they lose their colleagues, they also lose their entire social environment, because many of these people, they go out with their colleagues after work. They talk to their colleagues about everything non-work related. So when they're sent home, not only do they, it can be a traumatic thing for many people. So it's very important for managers who want to have create a culture around remote workforce, that they find ways to maintain that social activity. I have seen some of our clients who have done Friday afternoon events via Zoom, where they have had drinks and dinner. So dinner were ordered and sent to all the employees wherever they were. But they were actually eating together and having drinks together at a Friday afternoon, as they would have had in the office. So it's not the same thing, but it's really important that I think loneliness is the biggest factor for people and for managers to avoid when you're working remotely.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dr. Finn. That would be my question for the moment. I would pass the stage back to Azib. But thank you for your insight, sir. Thank you. Very crucial element we have there.
Thanks, Mike. Wonderful questions as always. At this point, Dr. Finn, we would like to get to know a bit more about you personally and as a man. And we like to play this little game. It's called This or That. So I'm going to give you two things. You just choose between this or that. And based on your answer, maybe we'll get a bit more insight about who you are. I kind of know the answer to this already, perhaps, but would it be countryside or city?
Well, I lived in cities all my life, actually, and I could never imagine myself living in the countryside until a couple of years ago. I don't know if you know that there was a big terror attack in Nice in 2016, where almost 100 people were killed and hundreds of people were injured. My wife and I, we were inches away from being killed in that terror attack. And that was a game-changing moment for us, and where I think that, okay, I think we are moving out of the cities and moving to mountains where nothing happens, of that kind at least.
Yes.
So we did, and it has been I have always enjoyed being in nature, always enjoyed hiking and climbing in the mountains and things like that. But it has been a really, really good experience moving out of the city and moving up in the high mountains. And we're still only 1 hour away from Nice, but we have a lot of wild animals around where we are living in a small village. And our clients love to come up here because they can get out of their comfort zone as well. And they have realized too, that they learn a lot more by being out in nature instead of sitting in a nice conference room with great lunches and sea view.
Right. Okay, next question. Sunset or sunrise?
Oh, definitely sunset. I'm not a morning person. I love working at night. That's where I'm most creative, and that's where well, I don't like early mornings. It's not like my thing. So yeah.
Yep. To each his own. Art museum or technology showcase?
Art museum. I think if I'm going to start an education again, which I will, I want to study art history, because art has played such an important role in our lives as when we have grown as civilizations anywhere in the world. And I think that focus on technology we have today, like it's the only thing important. I think it's going to backfire on us sooner or later. As a species, as a civilization, and art is very, very important to me, at least. And when people are getting having difficult times in life, they're always, these are the people who start producing art. They are the people who are seeking other sources of influence. They don't buy a new piece of technology when you want to get wiser. So art is a reflection of our own life, and I think it's very important to have that part of it as well.
Wonderful. And your final this or that question, very important, life-changing: coffee or tea?
Coffee.
It's because he has to stay up at night.
Yeah.
There you go. There, all the coffee people are out now. So thank you so much for playing that little game for us. I think we gained a lot of insight in that few minutes that we've asked you these key questions. But let's get back to our topic of winning culture. I myself am in the midst of a large integration and merger of two telecommunication companies. It's very fascinating and very interesting. Since it's ongoing, I can't talk much about it, but what would you say are the biggest mistakes that the companies can make during the courting stage, when you're talking about the merger and you're getting to know the other side? And what have you seen to be detrimental to a successful merger?
Well, that's an easy answer, because we have seen it so many times. The problem is that the top management who decides to do the merger or the acquisition, they are all good, because they usually get a lot of stock options, or at least a lot of money, and can see a future for themselves at the top of the cake in the new organization. But the middle managers and the employees, they are the people who are suffering. And usually, what we see a lot, and I guess you can have seen the same thing, that management, they lose attention very quickly as soon as the deal is signed, and somehow think that the post-merger integration happens by itself. And we have even seen a lot of companies, even big companies, who have merged or been involved in an acquisition, that they have no plan for how they're going to do the post-merger integration, and to which degree are they going to integrate the organization. So lack of knowledge and appreciation of the importance of the post-merger integration process, I think that's the biggest mistake that companies are making. The second biggest mistake they're making is that they think that they can master the process themselves, but they can't. First of all, they don't have the skills to do it. They might be very good at running the business, but they're not good at integrating two organizations. And as we talked about in the beginning of this show, people, managers and employees, they don't tell their bosses what they're feeling. They don't tell them the truth about what they think. They tell what the manager wants to hear. So having an external consulting firm facilitating the post-merger integration has a lot of advantages. first of all, you get the truth from everyone in the organization. Secondly, even if you're merging two organizations, you still need to run these two companies. And that is what the leadership is good at. They should focus on running the companies until they become one company, and let experts who are good at integrating companies facilitate the integration process.
Wonderful, wonderful lessons. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'll quickly pass to Nurul. We have probably one more round of this roundabout questioning for our audience. Go ahead, Nurul.
Dr. Finn, how are you feeling, Dr. Finn?
I'm very good, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, again, I'm going to ask you for another story. And this is my question. Could you share with us a story that, could you share with us a cultural changing story that is purely driven by kindness?
Wow, that's a good question.
That's a very good question. And I think I'll ask you another question then. What do you mean by kindness?
Nice.
By kindness, I mean, just now you talk about, when there's merger and whatnot, the things that bring these two engineers together are purpose, right? Driven by purpose. But that is very corporate-ish. That is very, I'm not going to say it's textbook, because it's not, because there's a lot of layers when you want to bring two people together. But in this case, I just want to hear any stories that, what people do it out of empathy, people do it of kindness, people doing it out of love, out of feeling. And
Well,
it's really cultural changing.
yeah, we saw that after the terror attack in Nice, actually, that it suddenly changed people's perception. The people who would usually not talk together, people who were usually not concerned about each other, suddenly everybody was concerned about everybody, and everybody helped each other out of nowhere, just because we all realized that there was a big external threat and a big external incident that have had a dramatic impact on thousands of people, not only those who died or got injured, but everybody who experienced it. So when things are happening from outside, it could be that or a natural disaster or something like that changes people's priorities from what they thought was important in life to what they realize is really important. And as tragic as it is, I think it's a good thing that we as human beings have that ability to change priorities when it's needed.
I love that. Yeah, because sometimes when we are driven by purpose, that purpose is priority. But when something happens, we are, as human, we are able to shift that thinking. We are able to reprioritize, and that is actually very, very important, because that's when values, the company values will come up strongly now. Will you prioritize, or would you, sticking to that one particular purpose? Thank you so much, Dr. Finn.
Yeah, I'd like to just add that the COVID situation we're facing in now also kind of had that bit of positive spin,
Right.
because people are now more caring about each other. There's a lot of grassroots efforts about helping each other out. So yeah, that's one of the
Absolutely.
rays of hope we're seeing out of this. So off to you, Michael. Go ahead.
Dr. Finn, Nurul, and Azib, thank you for the opportunity. Please excuse me, Dr. Finn. Sometimes, if you have been noticing me, my head is looking down. It's because I've got so many good stuff from you, Dr. Finn. And I will be crediting you as well. I will be crediting you.
You're not a mind map guy.
Oh, yeah. There you go. A lot of highlighting. So I'm being a student again. And I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to learn from you.
Likewise.
Made possible by Azib and also Nurul. So, Dr. Finn, my last question for you, and I will connect with you on LinkedIn after this, would be, what are your predictions of the future of work, and what culture do you see arising from that new trend post-pandemic, the next normal that you are going to see?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think a lot of people have put a lot of thoughts into that. But I think we have previously we have very much used work as a way to show our status in the society, both in terms of education and work, how much money we made, and that kind of thing. But today, most of the wealth is not created by you and I going to work. It's created by technology itself and transactions, and there's so much wealth in almost any societies that is not created by physical work that we need to look at a different way of distributing wealth. So that's why I believe and I hope that the universal basic income will be the norm. They're already doing experiments with that in Holland and other places as well. That because there's not physical work to everybody, so we need to find a different way of distributing wealth and make sure that everybody can make a living, and not only those who are sitting in front of a computer in a boring office somewhere, but everybody. So I hope actually that the status that work has had in the past will become less and less, and we focus on giving status to other things in the societies. It could be kindness, it could be anything actually, but I think we have to go through this change from looking at work as and having a work as being the only high status.
Understood. It's very powerful. I'm a fan of Netflix, Dr. Finn, and there was one particular series on Netflix called Black Mirror, and one of the episodes was that everyone on Earth has been programmed where you get merits or demerits based on the kindness that you have performed for others. So you have performed deeds of evil, you would have demerits, to the point where if you reach a certain limit, your face will be blurred out. So no one will notice you. So in order for you to unblur your face, you need to accumulate merits, So that was very powerful. And what you mentioned, because not having work being viewed as a stature in society, but rather for us being perhaps assessed on how caring we can be for other people, how we have made a difference to people's lives, how we've made a difference in our work. Perhaps that's the new form of measurement. Thank you, Dr. Finn, for your insights. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you, Michael, for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to offer this opportunity to Dr. Finn himself to maybe reflect on our conversation tonight. It's been 50 minutes of us going back and forth. And perhaps what is top of your mind? What have you learned from this conversation that we've just had?
I have learned a lot. And I think it's so great having these more contemporary perspectives to leadership and to work and life in general that we saw in the past. I remember when I did my MBA 1,000 years ago, everything was about shareholder value, and the only important thing in life was making money for the shareholders. Fortunately, we have seen the world moving in a different direction. We have climate change that is hopefully getting on everybody's agenda, that we look at different ways of using the resources on the planet that we share, that we focus on kindness, but also focusing on the similarities that we have and not only on the differences. But that's a problem with politicians. Politicians build their power base on singling out differences between people, because politicians are, in my view, that's entirely my personal view, but politicians are the enemy of the people because they're separating people in order to build their own power base.
Wow.
Do you disagree?
No. I think it's an interesting perspective. It's interesting perspective.
No, just look at it, because companies that when they have a common goal, you can talk almost anybody into agreeing on a common ground, agreeing on looking at what we have in common, except politicians.
And it happens everywhere, I assume, Dr. Finn.
Everywhere, it's a global phenomenon because it's implicit of being a politician that you need to build your power base on creating enemies.
Wow. That is
Wow.
an interesting perspective. And I
Yeah.
mean, not many of us have the courage to come out and say it, but we may think the same. But
I'm living high up in the mountains. Nobody can find me.
thank you so much, Dr. Finn. It's been a fantastic time. 1 hour just passed by
Likewise.
in
Thank you so
a
much for
snap
these
of a finger.
fantastic questions.
Wonderful conversation we've had. I hope we've introduced this to our audience, and you can share this video as well on your feed so that everyone, all of your 20 odd thousand followers can view it as well. And all of us here are, a fan of LinkedIn. Obviously, it's where we all connected. And I just wish everyone out there, everyone viewing live and everyone viewing the recordings, that they learned something from this, and they hope they enjoyed what we have shared. I'd like to spend a couple of moments, Doc, just showing people what's coming up on the calendar moving forward. Next week, we don't have a guest yet, so if anybody out there knows somebody that would be fantastic on this show right now, go ahead and help us to bring him or her on board. But we have a fantastic guest lined up after that on 3rd of November, Rachel Druckenmiller. She's a speaker, keynote speaker. She sings as well. She'll be very interesting from the United States. We have Andrea Koppel. Andrea is the former correspondent from CNN. She's also the daughter of legend Ted Koppel. And we also have another media personality, Frida Liu. She's Malaysian, and she's a host on BFM and many other TV shows as well. So please do stay tuned to Stay Kind, your weekly show. There's fantastic stuff lined up for you, just as we had a fantastic time tonight with Dr. Finn. And I still can't pronounce your name. Perhaps you'd like to pronounce your name for everyone before you say goodnight, Doc.
Oh, it's Majlergaard.
Majlergaard. That's not difficult for us
I don't
Malaysians. We can
expect
say that.
anyone to do it. So
No. Malaysians can say this. Majlergaard.
And I didn't choose it.
Majlergaard. Dr.
Finn, that's fine.
Not even close, he said. He said not even close. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Dr. Finn. Thank you so much for coming on board. Everybody,
Thank
please
you
take
so
care.
much.
Stay safe. Stay kind.
You
We will
too.
see you very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.